Welcome back, friends. Thanks for joining us today. Again, this is a video on Oliver Cromwell, who, as much as I hate to give him credit, is greatly responsible for not only the monarchy of England we see today, but the government of England we see today. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're new, please subscribe. Charging towards 1,000 subs before September is over. Now, last time we ended with Cromwell and King Charles looking at a compromise of separation of powers between the king and government. Now, as hopeful as things were beginning to look, Cromwell and Parliament could not make an agreement with the king. And now a second civil war had broken out. This time, however, it would not be a 4-year conflict. Instead, it would only take 7 months. Now, this was strictly due to the fact that even if the king could raise the troops, they would not be able to match the strength or organization of the new model army, which was not the British, which was now the British Army. Cromwell and Fairfax crushed the Royalist forces at 6 large battles, but the Second Civil War was bigger in the fact that it also included a Royalist uprising in Scotland. Also, across the Irish Sea, the Irish rose up again, refusing to be ruled by a Puritan parliament. But something else was occurring. Now, England had been a Protestant nation since Henry VIII. Charles' father, James I of England, and the Sixth of Scotland, had not only united the 3 kingdoms of England, Ireland, and Scotland, but he was also the grandson of Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, who was a loyal Catholic. So already the opinions of Parliament was that Charles was sympathetic to the Catholic Church, especially with his marriage to Henrietta Maria, the loyal Catholic daughter of the King of France. Now this is when Cromwell's descent into tyranny began, for once he had total command of the army. Though Thomas Fairfax was still in command, Cromwell had become seen as the face of the army, not only to the people, but to the army itself. So in Parliament, which became now known as the Rump Parliament, it was pretty much a parliament that did whatever Cromwell told them to, received discomforting news about the king. First, that he had no intention of ceding his power to Parliament. And second, he had actually been the one who offset the Irish Rebellion, promising Catholic autonomy, which in itself breached his oath of office as king. And the most damning was that he was corresponding with the Vatican and Pope through a surrogate in France to have a Catholic army come and save him and reinstate him as king. Now, he had many other charges, but the Catholic one had some extremely credible witnesses, including members of the king's Privy Council. The king was put on trial on January 20th, 1649. With 3 judges and 150 commissioners, including Cromwell and Thomas Fairfax. Now, this is when the 2 of them actually broke from one another. The king was already sentenced. The trial was a kangaroo court. Cromwell had already decided the king will die. But Fairfax was lord of the realm. He thought, though he did not agree with the king, he was a monarchist by heart, and wanted to keep the monarchy, but with restricted power. The king refused to answer any questions in the court, which would result in many people agreeing with the king that he's not answerable to the courts of men. Now, the Parliament, they saw the king as a man, but as a peasant, he was God's representative on earth. And though they wanted him restricted, they didn't want him dead. But as I said, Cromwell had already decided. He must die, and when the trial ended on January 27th, 1649, Charles Stuart, the first of his name, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, was guilty of high treason against the people of his realm. On January 30th, 1649, Charles was marched out to Whitehall to a crowd of civilians chanting, "God save the King," while the new model army kept them from saving him. He looked to his people and said, I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown, where no disturbance can be, no disturbance in the world. He then turned to his aide, handing him his personal effects, stating, "Remember." Then his final words, he looked at the executioner and said, "Stay for the sign." After finishing his prayers, the king would open his hands to signal to the executioner, and the king would be executed by decapitation. It was a solemn and quiet moment. And the only one celebrating was Cromwell. The monarchy was abolished. Long live the Republic and Commonwealth. But Cromwell had to catch a ship across the Irish Sea. Before the execution of the king, as I said earlier, the Irish recognized Charles as the authority and king and the person in charge of Ireland, and would not recognize the Puritan Parliament as their government. So Cromwell and 30,000 troops were crossing the Irish Sea. Now, some of you may be asking, "Tim, why does Cromwell care? Why does the English care? The Irish are Catholics. They are completely different people, Celtic from origin rather than the Anglo-Saxon Normans of England. So why keep Ireland?" So Ireland had been conquered by the very same Anglo-Norman kings before the Plantagenets became the monarchs of England. So it had been part of England for some time. So in the eyes of England, it was their land, just as Northumbria and Wessex were. But again, Cromwell was a Puritan, and a belief that their belief was that the Reformation had not done enough. So landing at Dublin, he first laid siege to the city of Drogheda. He wanted to secure the counties around Dublin so he'd be able to launch a campaign south through the Ring of Kerry and then into the north. The north at this point was slowly becoming more loyal to Protestantism, strictly because many Scots and English were settling across the small channel between the northern province of Ulster and Scotland. But once Drogheda was taken, Cromwell's brutality came through. He massacred the entire garrison of the city. He had moved to Wexford, where his men again slaughtered the garrison, but then also Cromwell allowed the killing of Irish women and children, plus sending 3,000 people into slavery in the New World. He would then fight the Battle of Ochall, the Siege of Waterford, and the Battle of Lisnarvie. It became clear his target was the Irish Confederation's capital of Kilkenny. On March 22nd, he began to lay siege on Kilkenny Castle. Now, Kilkenny was a little different. For 6 days, the 300 men defending Kilkenny Castle actually inflicted double the casualties on Cromwell's 4,000-strong army. When the Irish commander, Sir Walter Butler, finally capitulated, Cromwell actually respected him enough to tell him and allow him not only to let the civilians leave unharassed, but he even allowed Butler and his soldiers to leave the city. Cromwell would instruct the castle to be destroyed, but it would later be rebuilt. Cromwell's last command would be at the siege of Clonmel. This began the sacking of Munster, which is the southernmost province of Ireland, where, again, they would terrorize the Irish. Upon taking the castle of Clonmel, Cromwell handed command of the army to Henry Ireton, his son-in-law, giving him strict instructions to show the papist. For those of you who know, papist is a term used by the Reformation people to refer to Catholics, but to show the papist brutality, which Ireton would follow until his death in 1651 by natural diseases. Cromwell, however, was recalled from Ireland to put down the Royalist uprising in Scotland, which had become known as the Third Civil War. In a little over a year, Cromwell defeated the Scottish Royalists, being led by Charles I's son, the new Charles II. Upon winning the war at the Battle of Worcester in 1651, Cromwell finally returned to London. Now, in all honesty, as Irish from heritage, Cromwell is a monster. But as a historian, if you're looking at him from the point of view of a citizen in England, He has now won three civil wars, pacified Ireland, and banished all remnants of the monarchy from England and Scotland. Also, Parliament had become extremely unpopular while Cromwell was on campaign. They never established the elections they promised and were constantly enriching themselves. So Cromwell was looking pretty good to the regular Englishmen. He, though, had enough. He was furious that his dream of a united Commonwealth had fallen into corruption. So he, with his troop of soldiers, similar actually to what Charles I did, entered Parliament. Marching into the House of Commons, he finally dissolved the Rump Parliament. While clearing the representatives out, Cromwell saw the golden ceremonial mace given to the House by the monarchs. He screamed while throwing it off its pedestal, "Away with this bauble." Cromwell established a new parliament, which was called the Bare-Bone Parliament because it truly had no power. Because Cromwell decided something. England couldn't be ruled by a group of men. It was not in the nation's blood. It had been for too long a monarchy. Between the petty Saxon kings, the Plantagenets, the Tudors, and the Stuarts, for centuries there had been a single figure ruling England. So Cromwell, in quotes, reluctantly established the Protectorate, declaring himself Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland. The irony is he had himself pretty much crowned in a coronation. The very thing he had fought to remove, he now had become. Now the next move was he established everything into military districts. This was so he could maintain control of everything using the British Army. He knew he couldn't trust Parliament to follow his strict puritanic laws and orders, but he could use the fear of the military. He legitimized this by his second parliament that made England a military state, ruled by him as a de facto king, called the Lord Protector. Now, I won't sit here and say it was like the Reign of Terror in France. In fact, besides the Puritan-based laws, life in England wasn't terrible. They had actually won a war against the Dutch, put down a few more royal uprisings, and signed a treaty with King Louis XIV against Spain. But he did ban certain things such as Christmas partying and things like that because he believed life was about penance. But also he put more control into the hands of Parliament, with the exception of the military. He brought about schooling and such things like that. He, though very conservative, brought progressive reforms in science and education. In 1658, however, at the age of 59, he had become ill. It was believed at first he was just suffering from kidney stones. But his illness took a hard turn in the summer. A Catholic missionary recognized it as malaria fever. He declared his son Richard his successor as Lord Protector, as he had now become bedridden and not able to be as active. He was in constant pain, day in and day out. Finally, on September 3rd, 1858, the man who killed the king, the false liberator, the Lord Protector, Oliver Cromwell, died of malaria. His son would last a short 9 months as Lord Protector. Parliament would then restore Charles II to the throne of England in 1660. Charles would order the bodies of Cromwell, Ireton, and other parliamentarian leaders responsible for his father's death exhumed and given posthumous executions on January 30th, 1661, the 12-year anniversary of Charles I's execution. His body would be held in chains over Tyburn in London. Then the body was thrown into a pit and his head displayed outside Parliament. It would then be stolen and finally returned and buried on March 25th, 1960 at Sidney's Sussex College of Cambridge. Oliver Cromwell is remembered today as a regicidal dictator, a murderer who took joy killing off Catholics in Ireland. But, and again, I have to be fair as a historian, he was like any other man. He was a man who wanted the best for his nation, and that quest took him down a dark route that resulted in the deaths of thousands. the deportations of thousands into slavery, and a history of fear, but also left behind good. A parliamentarian system that almost 400 years after his death still sits well. So well that his period of history is to this day commemorated in the State Open of Parliament, where the monarchy must request entry to the House of Commons. And for that reason, in the heart of Westminster Palace sits the Oliver Cromwell Memorial. For all the bad he did, he shaped modern England. Thanks for watching. I'm happy that we can have civil discussions about people, even like Oliver Cromwell, that we can recognize his historical place he has in not only England, but world history. Many Irish in America, pre-Black 47 potato famine, were sent because of Cromwell. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and comment. And again, if we're new to the channel, please subscribe. We're getting so close every day, so let's try to hit 1,000. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.